Hey everybody, Mike Miller, Herald Times, Andy Graham, Birds of a Feather, kind of.
Yeah, birds being the operative word here. Our baseball teams are. Mike's team was the first team to clinch a division title this year, and my team is proceeding apace in that regard. So we're
Marching toward October.
we've been dreaming of a bird versus bird World Series. Why not? Could definitely happen.
Ornithologically correct crime of some sort.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I figured, he's always got the Cardinals hat rocking. Why not bring the birds into the...
Absolutely, and it's really impressive, actually. I know we're here to talk IU football, but if somebody would have told me that, and I expected Baltimore to be a strong squad, but if somebody would have told me before the season they were not only going to be the American League East champions, but be the first team to clinch, I would have said,
Watched a lot of games this year, Andy. I didn't see it either. No, speaking of things I didn't see though, let's get back to Indiana. Things I didn't see last week coming.
No.
Bowling Green loss, scoring 42 points in a max stadium and still finding a way to lose. Tall task at hand this week at Missouri and Columbia. You hate to go into a game and say they don't have a chance because they obviously do have a chance. But it's again, it's going to be tough. I mean, a lot of things have to go right. I've sort of said that. You were here in 2004. I've sort of looked back at that, just having knowledge of that game when they went to Oregon, was ranked number 24 at the time, going there, and that was just a game where Indiana was able to pull off the upset due to a ridiculous amount of seven turnovers.
Right?
And that's really, I mean, if Indiana's going to come back to Bloomington with a win this weekend, I mean, they have to absolutely, I think, find a way to not only be darn near perfect on offense, but win the turnover margin by a very large number.
That's probably right, although I think this Indiana team's much better than that 2004 Indiana team, certainly on offense. I mean, that team had some guys. It had Courtney Roby, and it had Porter was one of the DBs. They had some guys that played in the NFL, so it wasn't like they were bereft of talent, but it wasn't as talented as this team is offensively. The defense is a big issue, but offensively, let's just talk about that first.
Sure.
Missouri has a bunch of NFL guys on their defensive front four. Their defensive ends are all SEC caliber guys. Even though they graduated the guys, they sent a couple of guys into the NFL draft from their defensive line last year.
And Gary Pinkel says this group might even be better. And they thought this last year. They thought last year the depth they had behind them, it was equal to Coney Ely and Michael Sam.
So. Right. And I think these guys will constitute a major challenge for an experienced Indiana offensive line. Let's see how Indiana's offensive line handles this. I think a big key, frankly, is will Indiana be able to get its running game going early? It wasn't able to against Bowling Green, which I think helped bog down the offense in the first half. Indiana could have put some distance between itself and Bowling Green in the first half, because in the first half the IU defense was holding Bowling Green to field goals.
Yeah.
If Indiana scores 28 points or something like that in the first half, that game's probably over. But the running attack really bogged down, especially to the short side of the field, especially on the right side of the line for whatever reason. I think sometimes they ran into a defensive slant or a blitz or something, but they were having some issues. But, I mean, the offensive line was purportedly a strength for IU coming into the season. If it has a good game, if it's able to handle Missouri's defensive front enough to have a running attack going, that helps alleviate the pressure that's going to come on passing downs.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a big key to the game. Defensively, I mean, everything is key, but I think the main thing, and I'm saying this in a column for Saturday, is that I think Indiana fans just want to see aggressiveness at this point. They just want to see, look, good teams with good quarterbacks want you to blitz, because they'll eat that up. They'll get some cheap scores or whatever, some big gains. They'll burn you if you blitz. But I think a lot, and there are a lot of ways to be aggressive besides blitzing. But I do think a lot of Indiana fans would like to see the defense just play with its hair on fire and just really have a our colleague
so many distractions.
Our colleague Bill down there has just made himself a paper Cubs hat, and so he's weighing in on our baseball chapeau meme here. But anyway, I think defensively, look, I think a lot of IU fans, I mean, Missouri could score 60 points and gain 600 yards. It's not like Indiana fans would be happy.
Right.
But they could handle it if they think the defense is really coming after them.
That's what I think is, if you want to look at takeaways from this game, just watch the defense, sort of pick up on things like that. I sort of mentioned in the chat today, a guy like Tim Bennett, he's a guy that gets burned every once in a while, but he tries to make plays. He's a guy who goes out there and gambles a little bit, but you like to see just the enthusiasm, the aggression. I mean, again, he gets burned, and when he gets burned, it doesn't look good. But you got to give him credit for actually trying to go out there and make plays. I mean, Indiana needs to sort of adopt a mindset similar to that, where they need to go out there, fly around, not really fear the consequences of a negative play, and just sort of try to make something happen.
Well, I like to see man coverage. I like to see a fair amount of man coverage, and there was actually quite a bit of that on the final drive against Bowling Green. Part of that led to a couple of pass interference penalties. But Indiana was trying to disguise that. They were playing off receivers, and people were thinking, they're playing soft zone. So I think they're actually trying to disguise the fact that they were playing man a lot of the time. But regardless of that, I think, people look at IU and they say, well, there aren't any really classic rush ends. Missouri has rush ends.
Yeah.
I mean, Indiana really doesn't. But do I think a guy like Nick Mangieri can get to the passer if he's rested and ready to go and all of that? If he stays fresh out there, yeah. Do I see guys like Tigre Scales and from the linebacker point of view, or Antonio Allen from safety,
Chase Dutra,
who can come in on a blitz and be effective because they're fast? Yeah, I do. I mean, it isn't like I think Indiana is incapable of applying pressure, and I think if they apply it creatively and if they apply it consistently, I think that's what a lot of fans want to see. And once again, the results might not happen this week. I mean, Missouri's really good. Missouri might take advantage of that and score a bunch of points. But I think the Indiana defenders need to, in my view, need to learn to start playing downhill and not be back on their heels and be aggressive and just come after folks. And they'll make mistakes and they'll get burned sometimes. But I mean, I think that's still preferable to just sitting back and allowing an offense to get a rhythm. I mean, let's face it. We saw a backup MAC quarterback who's probably pretty good, by the way. I mean, Matt Napke won some state titles at Fort Wayne Luers. He's probably pretty good. But it was just his second start, and they allowed him to get comfortable, to get what turned out to be a lethal rhythm.
He let that, the rhythm was all fast pass, and that's what killed him. He was all dink and dunk, and you can't let him get
and you can't really blitz that.
Right.
But there's still different ways you can be aggressive in trying to handle that.
Yeah.
So, or just, once again, really tight man and just trying to deny him the quick throw.
Sure.
Or I mean, Nick Mangieri drops into coverage when he doesn't expect it. That turns into a pick. Mm-hmm. More of that, and we'll see. Once again, I'm not a coach. I can't sit and judge exactly how aggressive Brian Knorr, the new defensive coordinator, was or was not against Bowling Green. But even when the head coach comes out on Monday following the game and says, I think we need to adopt a more aggressive posture across the board, coaches and players, I think there's something to that.
Yeah, and it's obviously that was sort of the buzzword of the week was aggression, and it's kind of it's a little disheartening, I think, to maybe in the second week of the season where you actually have to come out and say we're not aggressive enough. I mean, there are some new factors at play, new coordinators, new personnel, but at the same time, I mean, this is a thing they've been talking about since spring ball.
I know
we're going to be aggressive. We're going to come out, and we didn't see it last week.
And words don't matter now. I mean, you have to show it. They're going to the show me state, so they need to show it.
Read Andy's column tomorrow.
That's what the column says. But yeah, I think that it really is a situation where the players want to play that way. I think there's no reason not to just unleash them and let them make their mistakes and let them screw up sometimes. That's okay. But they need to, Indiana, I think if it's going to be effective on defense, it has to be aggressive. And I think that's just the way it's got to be. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's going to be some growing pains. There's always going to be when you're changing defensive schemes.
Sure.
That's just part of the deal.
Yeah, and we knew this would be sort of a slow build up, but we thought we'd just see a little more out of the gates.
I think that's it's hard to say how much a bye week in the second week affected them. I thought it might actually be an advantage. Coaches say that teams gain the most from week 1 to week 2, or from game 1 to game 2, basically. They learn a lot from the opener. In Indiana's case, I'm not sure how much they learned from the Indiana State game, although to the Trees' credit, they went up and beat Ball State Saturday. But I don't know if Indiana really, I'm not sure how much Indiana learned. And maybe instead of being fresh and whatnot, they were a bit rusty. Mm-hmm. I mean, they looked a bit rusty coming out in terms of some of the offensive line stuff and whatnot.
A little bit.
So who knows? But I mean, it was an unusual week to have a bye week, and I don't know if it affected them adversely or not. But
I'd be willing to bet we probably don't see it again under Kevin Wilson. I'm sure he would do anything possible to.
Yeah.
But then again, there are other factors at play as far as scheduling too.
Right.
I mean, so it's not all up to Indiana to actually,
No, I mean it's not as easy to change contracted games as people might think.
And a lot of Big Ten teams I think do have a double bye this year. Indiana's not the only one. It's just sort of the way it played out, early on. But we're running out of time, minute or less. Andy, what's your prediction for Saturday?
Well, I think it'll be a fairly substantial Missouri win because I think Missouri's really good.
Yeah.
And I think Indiana will take some chances and probably get burned a bit, but I think that's okay. I think Indiana should score some points too. So I'm looking at something like a 42-28 game or something like that.
I was picking 52-28 exactly. Yeah, okay, something like that.
Something like that. I mean, and it depends on how the defense plays. I do think there's a little more capacity on that side of the ball. I do think it'll take some time to see it, it appears, because we didn't see it last Saturday.
Maybe we'll see it this week. We'll see. Thanks, guys.